Hi, and welcome to the Robust Woman podcast, where it is my mission to help skeptical and unfulfilled women transform into the robust woman. Thank you also to those of you who are watching on Facebook Live or YouTube. On today's show, I have the honor and privilege to interview a very special guest, a purpose driven woman and a subject matter expert on, well, just what we've been covering in the previous podcasts, only as it relates to parenting. I know that personally for me, this has been huge. And even though I have overcome and I continue to overcome fear and my limiting beliefs in various aspects of my life, in all honesty, parenting has been an area that I continue to operate in the default mode. And Laura is someone who has overcome and has just incredible, profound wisdom and knowledge on how to raise kids by parenting fearlessly. Welcome to the show, Laura. You have such an impressive bio, and I'm humbled and excited to learn from you and share you with our audience.
I'm so excited to be here with you. I think you're amazing. I think your message is a message everyone needs to hear.
Thank you, Laura. I am going to, I'm just so impressed and really inspired by you that I am going to read your bio if that's okay. So I know that we're connected through the John Maxwell team. So you're a certified international leadership coach, speaker, and trainer with the John Maxwell team. Laura has shared the stage with John himself, as well as accompany him and the team on leadership missions in Costa Rica. Laura understands the power of self-awareness and enjoys training, coaching, and leading groups of growth-minded individuals. Laura is a crisis counselor and the director of education at a Long Island Crisis Center and has worked with students in crisis, families and schools in crisis, as well as for prevention at various Long Island districts for 11 years now. And I know this because I personally have experienced that you are passionate about educating and empowering our youth to rise during times of adversity, be their own advocate, and regulate emotions. Laura is the founder of Infinity Growth and Development, a coaching and training company to help individuals reach their highest and greatest potential. John Maxwell says the toughest person to lead is always yourself. And Laura practices self leadership daily and believes that the quality of a leader you are is not reflected in a title or by a circumstance. Her mission is to bring leadership into education because only leaders can create more leaders, and the youth of today need us. Gosh, Laura, that is just like when I read your bio, the one thing that grabs my attention is also how you left your promising corporate career to fulfill your calling. I know that, for myself and for a lot of women, that's something that you're at this point where you think about what is my calling? I'm in a career that's fulfilling, but is that really what I'm called for? Could you maybe tell us a little more about that part of your journey and how you made the decision to leave and really, live out your calling?
Yeah, so I feel like I was so guided. I wish I could say that I had like this realization and I just left, but I had children and I worked in New York City. I was a vice president of a bank. My husband worked in New York City, and we were far from our children, right? We were about probably an hour and a half if there was a train waiting for me. So the anxiety was starting to build a little bit about, leaving my kids with somebody all that time and what if something happened. And so I ended up taking a leave from that job to be home for a little while. And it was during that time that, I couldn't sit still. I was a high energy person. And so when my kids would go to school, nursery school, I would go volunteer. And I started volunteering in places like the Crisis Center, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and a hospital on Long Island that specialized with children diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
So it was a 360 turnaround for me because I worked in private banking. So
Mm-hmm.
I worked with very affluent, high net worth individuals. And I was on Park Avenue in this pretty office. I really lived in a bubble. And I knew what success looked like, but I didn't know what significance looked like.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what John, and you know this, being a colleague, John Maxwell talks about, the difference between success and significance. And I never knew that.
Mm.
So when I was volunteering, I was feeling this sense of, it was scary at first because it was so new, but I was trained. I got, was trained in this, became certified crisis counselor. And what I found was in people's moments of crisis, I was able to make such a meaningful difference. And I loved that work. And when it came time to go back to work, I was offered my job back at the bank. And at that time, we had grown, taken over other banks. And I didn't want to do it. And I remember telling my husband, and he was like, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be a crisis counselor. And
Wow.
he said, every day? Do you want to do that like all the time? It's draining. And, but it was through taking a chance, taking that leave, which was very hard for me to do. As a woman and an independent woman,
Mm-hmm.
I that was scary. And I'm not going to say that I did that easily. I went through a whole identity crisis when I left that job, and I couldn't sign my name and put VP after it.
Of course.
And I know that sounds, now the person I am now can't even believe that I was so tied to my title
Mm.
and my status where I was, but I was, and going through that really was a wonderful lesson for me.
Wow. Yes, and you call it out very specifically in your bio that you don't believe that leadership is positional, and yeah, and that's really interesting. Yes.
I don't now.
Yes, yes,
I can
yes.
say that with all certainty. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you know that. I mean, we all know that we've had leaders in our lives that had titles that were not the image of a leader.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean because I was a vice president doesn't mean I was a good leader.
absolutely. Absolutely right. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of crisis, Laura, we're all in a sense in this, you know, COVID world that we're just existing almost, some thriving, but for the most part, we're just trying to get through one lockdown after the other. As we record this, I'm in Melbourne in lockdown stage 4, and I empathize and understand that it's a very difficult time for parents in particular, but I guess more importantly for kids because they thrive on routine, and everything has just like sports have like just come to a halt, and so has any activity. They were schooling in a new environment. What has been your experience over the last few months, just with this whole paradigm shift? And what advice do you have for moms in particular who are struggling during this period?
Yeah. Um, how we handle a crisis has a lot to do with how we handled life before the crisis. So if we look at life before the crisis and what we know about this generation, we know they were struggling before COVID came. We know that there was a little bit of a disconnect between
Mm-hmm.
parents and children, this generation gap, this technology gap, really, is what it is.
Yeah.
So that was going on already. And then enter a crisis. It magnifies everything that's existing, and it opens up all the little cracks that were there that we were able to kind of go over a little bit. And I see that's what's happening now. So students that were anxious, which here in the US is 1 in 3,
Wow.
right? 1 in 3. So anxiety is high, and they're more anxious now. right? Students that were feeling down are more feeling down now. Students that had difficulty regulating their emotions, which is a number one challenge for this generation, is emotional regulation. They're having more trouble now. Parents that felt stressed before are feeling more now. Parents that felt disconnected before are feeling more now. Everything is magnified with a crisis. And that's what I'm seeing. Emotional regulation is something I'd love to just explain for a second, if
Please
that's
do.
okay.
Yes, sure, please.
Cornell University has the longest running study on non-suicidal self-injury. And that is a behavior we've seen on the rise with students self-harming.
Mm-hmm.
And the number one reason this 15-year study has shown that students self-harm is for lack of emotional regulation.
Wow.
And that means the inability to shift an emotion, right? So if I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling down, I believe that that's just the way life is, the way my life is, the way I am. And I don't know that I have the ability to change that emotion, right? And if you notice, when students talk about how they feel, like their emotions, at least when I talk to them, they'll say things to me like, I'm mad,
Mm-hmm.
depressed, right? I'm an anxious person.
Yes.
And when we speak like that, right, they become the emotion. They're identifying themselves as the emotion. I'm angry. So if a youth, shares that with you, their emotion, and uses it in that way, I'm mad, I'm depressed, it would be great to reframe that and just say something like, it sounds like you're feeling down, or it sounds like you're feeling angry, right? We can't be an angry, right? Angry is an
Yes.
emotion, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
they use it as a noun, right? Like who they are,
Yeah.
their being.
Their identity almost. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. And so when we identify as the emotion, we don't think we have control over it. We think it controls us. And that's a message I feel really important to get across to youth. When I do big trainings like auditoriums filled with youth, I ask that question, right? I'll say, we have positive and negative thoughts. They come in and out of our mind all day long. Which ones do you hold on to? And by
Mm-hmm.
far, it doesn't matter where I am, they say negative thoughts. And then I'll say, do you know how to shift them? And they'll say, we can't shift our thoughts. We can't do that. And then I'll ask them, if you can't shift your thoughts, who can? Nobody can do that for you. One of the things I used to say to my kids as they got older, I work for a suicide prevention agency, right? So I do a lot of work in suicide prevention. And I used to say to them as they got older, I love you so much and I would do anything for you. But there's one thing I will never be able to do. As hard as I try, I will never be able to go inside your head to know what you're thinking. That is up to you. To be
Absolutely.
aware of your thoughts, to know when it's time to talk about something, because this generation is also very good at stuffing things down.
Mm.
And when we do that, we sometimes stop feeling because it's too much to feel. But whatever we stuff down ends up coming out. It comes out in misdirected ways. It comes out in behavior. But it comes out because emotions have to be expressed. They're
Absolutely.
little pieces of energy that are moving. And even if we stuff
Mm-hmm.
them down, they still try to find their way out. So that's kind of what I'm seeing is more of what there was, only magnified.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, one of the reasons, I started the parenting group, right? When you
Mm-hmm.
say that with parenting, as much as you have grown, right? We go back to our programming sometimes. I do it too. And
I'm so guilty. Yes.
it's ingrained in us. It's how we were raised. Um, we were raised that way, and so it just comes out. It's in our programming. So unless we are conscious of our parenting and we become conscious of it, we will resort back to our default.
Hmm.
And it's like that with anything. Um, but how many people really work on their parenting?
Yeah. It takes a lot of intentionality. And I think particularly now, you spoke about suppressing emotions. I think now with all the outlets they have with social media and TikTok and all of these, feeds that they can just keep through the day, it's just easier for them, right? It's just so much easier for them to just switch off and just be. But as parents, I feel like we're in this unprecedented, everything's a new norm almost. It's like, one social media platform. You feel like you've got your head around that, and like there's apps like Bark and all of these, like how do you mitigate some of, and then just as for me, and I'm speaking here just my own experiences, I feel like I've worked something out, and then, and and we've spoken about, the default for me has been fear, right? It's just always what the what ifs. But I do recognize that I've had to rewire and reprogram, and thanks to you, I'm learning so much about empowering and having a different parenting style intentionally. But what advice would you give parents who, particularly dealing with, teenagers, the Gen Zs, with technology, and now with the lockdown, I feel like there's not a lot of there's not a lot of other things they can really be engaged with. So where do you really draw the lines, I guess?
Right. And so, you know what? If we try to keep up with the sites that are coming out at the speed that they're coming out, it would be a full-time job. We wouldn't be
Yes.
able to do anything else. And really, if we think about it, it's really all one and the same, right? It's all one and the same. It's like if you're teaching your child about, drinking,
Mm-hmm.
do you talk about, well, there's this vodka and that gin and this, so there are lots of sites. We don't have to we don't have to know about every one of them, but they do have to know the rules that apply to every one of them. Right. Once we start getting into this, these specific,
The mechanics of, yeah.
it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, and there'll always be a new one, always.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really about, when it comes to social media, I equate it to like, how do we teach them about drinking or excessively any kind of other destructive methods of coping?
Mm-hmm.
It's in general, right? So these are the rules about social media. This is what social media can do when it's too much. Helping them to understand that in moderation, everything is okay. But excessively, or here are the rules to follow, right? We don't give personal information. We don't send a sexually suggestive picture. These are the rules to follow. And here's why we don't do that. That's important too, is to let them know what is in it for them.
Yeah.
When it comes to all of those social media, especially, because their development is not there yet. Right? The brain develops from the back to the front, and the front part of our brain is the part that is responsible for reasoning and consequences and, making decisions. So until that is fully developed, which they say is not until 24, 25 years old, we have to be their frontal lobe for them, right? That
Mm-hmm.
prefrontal cortex. We have to help them, guide them, teach them how to make decisions. We can't expect that they will know how to do it, right? Scientifically, we know they can't, right? So I named the program Fearless Parenting because the way to know an empowering parent is they are not coming from fear. And I've done it myself. Fear, as you have said in your podcast, it's tricky, right? It shows up and it disguises itself. And there are times I came from fear, especially, I'm not going to get into the whole story, but I share it in the program. I went through something with my own son. And I would have sworn I was coming from love. I was coming from fear the whole time. The whole time. And the way to tell the difference, if you're coming from fear or from love, because that's how tricky fear is. We tell ourselves it's because we love them, right? But really, it's because we're so afraid.
Yes.
So the way to tell the difference is what you're hoping for. Is it going to solve a problem for you or for them? Right? So what I was hoping for with my son, I wanted it to happen for him, but really a lot of it was for me. I wanted to feel better. I didn't want to worry all the time. I thought that the only way I could come out of that would be for him to make better choices. And I thought, and my upbringing tells me that, right? I grew up in an Italian family. So what your kids do reflects whether you're a good parent. I had to really come face to face with that. And it helped me a lot to know, as a crisis counselor and with the work I do, I know that people's behavior reflects how they feel. It doesn't reflect me. It doesn't reflect my parenting. It reflects how he feels. And so I do have a couple of I have 5 takeaways.
Wonderful. Oh, that's awesome. Thank you.
Right. So the first one, what do fearless parents do is they don't take behavior personally. They understand that their child's behavior is a reflection of how they feel and not their parenting. Because here's what happens is most of the time, if a child will slam the door or roll their eyes at us, right, we'll react to that. And we'll think it's things like disrespectful. How dare you do that? You don't slam the door at me. I'm your mother or your father or whatever it is. And so when we do that, we're taking their behavior personally and we're making it about us.
Yeah, there's rejection even right from that we're probably demonstrating there.
Exactly. Right. And so now it becomes this power struggle, don't you do that? How dare you do that? And we lose the opportunity to say to them, you seem really mad. It seems like you're feeling angry. Slamming the door like that, what's going on? It changes everything. And that's coming from love, is not taking their behavior personally.
That is so good.
And knowing it's about them and using that as a time to connect with them about how they feel, right? So connecting brings me to another one. Number 2, connecting more than we correct. Connection is a number 1 protective factor when it comes to suicide prevention. Connection. But as parents, we sometimes miss those times to connect on a feeling level because we take it personally. And so we want to correct them. You don't do this, you don't do that. We use these opportunities to correct rather than to connect. And, fearless parents connect. You'll have plenty of time to correct, believe me. You'll have lots of opportunities to do that. But when you build that connection and you can connect with them on a feeling level, you open up the door to communication. It's amazing what happens when we don't take it personally, right? And we use these times where we could correct to connect.
Mm.
So number 3 is practicing good EQ, right?
Yeah.
What is your emotional intelligence like? Meaning, how well can you manage your emotions, right? When you are stressed, what do you do? When you're feeling angry, what do you do? When you're feeling upset with them for something, how long does it last before you can shift that emotion, right? We are walking models for them.
Mm. That is
And
so
I
good.
know with my son, I was telling him, I want to help you. Let me help you. How come you're not letting me help you? And that's what I wanted consciously. But subconsciously, my EQ, my emotional regulation, was showing him I can't even help myself.
Mm.
I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping. I would plead with him, please, you've got to do this, or you've got to do that, or look at these people that you're hanging out with. Look what's happening. Why aren't you seeing it? I was coming from fear. And when I worked on myself and I got myself to the place, not where I am now, but a lot better than what I was, he was able to come to me and say, Mom, I need your help. And when that happened, I I was so grateful. But what I realized was I had to help myself before I could have helped him.
Yeah.
And I was asking, please let me help you. But what I was showing him was, I can't help you. I can't even help me. So we send them messages about how well we handle our emotions. And they will get those loud and clear. And then they'll determine whether or not they'll share with you based on how well you can do it. So practicing that good EQ is really important. So we're up to number 4 now, I think. So involve them in all things that involve them.
Mm-hmm.
So if something involves them, involve them in it. Get their input on it. Ask them about what they feel about it, right? We often make these decisions for them, and it's not our fault. It's not our fault. None of this is because we're good or bad parents.
Mm-hmm.
We know what we know, right? And you know, we don't have a manual that tells us, at 14 years old, give them the pen and say, you know what? I've been writing your life for you. I've been deciding what sports I wanted you to play. I've been buying your clothes. I've been decorating your room. I've been doing all of these things. Now, here's the pen. You go write your story. I'm going to sit back and I'm going to watch you and I'm going to guide you, but it's yours now. There's no time that tells us to stop making all the decisions for them. And so we still think that we know what's best. Like, really, when is the time to step back a little bit?
Yeah, I hear that a lot, even from moms of adult children who say the letting go is just it's tough, even as your kids could be in their 30s and you still struggle with wanting to run to their rescue or advise or prevent them from making choices that aren't. But I like
Exactly.
what you said about handing over the pen. But what is just on that, I just have a question, Laura, if I may, is what is the right age, or is it really up to the maturity of the individual child and it's up to the parent's discretion to say, or is it a process of letting go and just relaxing some boundaries and allowing them to make some choices? And
Well, the key really is to do it little by little, right?
mhm,
So when you start involving them in the process when they're younger, one of the reasons we don't let go is that we don't feel comfortable in the decision making they might make, right? And so we don't feel comfortable because we haven't let them make decisions prior to that, right? So when we start with the little decisions, like, oh, what clothes do you want to wear today? Or, oh, when you shared that toy with Johnny, how did that make you feel? Or I noticed you were a really good friend today. When you helped Mary, was that hard for you to do? Like making, getting those deep questions, getting them to think into it, letting them make little decisions along the way. When we see that, when we allow them to do that along the way, and they get older, because the consequences get higher and bigger, but we feel safer doing it because we've worked our way up to that, right? And it works in thoughts become feelings,
Mm-hmm.
become behaviors, and then there's a result, right? So thoughts, feelings, behaviors, result. What usually happens is they have the thought, they have the feeling, they have the behavior, and we take away the consequence.
That's true. Yes.
They have to have that piece, right? And the younger they could have the consequences, the easier they are for us to help them work through. Right. And just the other day, I had a father who was telling me he had an argument with his son, who is 13, who was playing, he was gaming all night. And he went in his room. It was 1 a.m. And he said, he started yelling at him, the rules, you're supposed to be off at 10, and they were going back and forth, and it became this big battle. And he said to me, well, what should I have done? Because he does this, and then the next day I have to deal with his attitude. He's tired, he's grouchy. And, by doing that, force brings resistance every time. And that's just physics, right? That's just science.
Absolutely.
So what could he do? He maybe could have said to him, we talked about the rules. 10 o'clock was the time. It's 1 a.m. and you're still on. I would like for you to get off now, but tomorrow when you are, if you're feeling cranky or have a bad attitude, I'm going to expect you to be able to fix it. And walk out the room. And that's hard. That's hard. That's hard. But let's be honest, right? If that child doesn't see the consequence of being up late himself, he won't change it.
Yes.
Okay, and so then the last one is validate their feelings, right? Validate before we try to problem solve. So they say to you, I'm so upset, my friends don't like me, they left me out, nobody called me to do this or contacted me. Very often we want to say, oh, your friends like you, or of course they like you. Maybe they just messed up. Maybe, they forgot. They could have forgotten to text you. You don't know. That's probably what happened, right? And we go right to problem solving.
Yeah.
But we forget that little piece where they started the conversation that said, I'm really upset. They left me out. So we go right to, oh, they couldn't have left you out. Maybe this happened or that happened, without validating the feeling. And so when we do that over and over, they feel dismissed. They feel like their feelings are not heard, so they can't be important. Right? So what the way to reframe that is to say, I'm sorry you feel so upset. That sounds really hard to be left out. Sometimes people can not think all the way through when they're planning things, but I'm sorry it made you feel like that. And then go into whatever else you're going to say. But don't lose those moments, because when they feel upset, betrayed, broken trust, not liked, isolated, we want to fix it. We don't like that they feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's so important to validate those feelings. Okay. So, the first one was, not to take their behavior personally. It's
Yep.
not about us, it's about them. Number 2 was connect more than we correct. And 3 was managing your own emotions, because we're sending them messages with the way we handle emotions. Number 4, involve them in what involves them. Get their input. You'll see a difference just by doing that, right? And number 5 is validate before we problem solve. So those are some tips on how to be a fearless parent. There's a lot of fear out there. That's one of the things when we talk about Gen Z, they are the highest diagnosed generation when it comes to mental health.
Right.
They are being raised in an anxious world.
Mm-hmm.
And I often wonder, does our anxiety about the world rub off on them?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because when we're anxious about the world, we can't control the world. So what can we control? I know I can control my child, and I'll just
Yes.
control them, and then I won't be so afraid.
Wow.
So any questions or anything that you think could be helpful?
No, I'm just thank you. I was going to ask you to summarize, which you've just done. So this is really, and as I just listen to you summarize, I think there's two things as a parent for me is all of what you've just said. If I was to like consistently model these 5 principles, I would just grow in my own, awareness. I'd just be rather than trying to control and spend that, invest that energy on trying to fix something, I'm going to empower my child. And in the process, I'm going to grow as an individual as well, right? So, which is just so profoundly, just I think that in itself is just so empowering for both of us. And it's going to be a process where we then sort of, look at each other going, that was a journey that we embarked on together, and I'm just that just makes me really emotional that
But you're so right. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's a journey you're embarking on together. And as a parent, we'd be remiss if we don't think that they have something to teach us.
absolutely.
And we have to be open to that. Parents, sometimes we stop growing. I stopped growing for a while. It wasn't until I went back to college to change my career. I was 40. I started to grow again. And I thought, wow, this feels so good. And it's exactly what you say. We can't be a great parent if we're not an aware person, right? We have to grow as people to grow as a parent.
Mm.
We can't really do one without the other. So that's the icing on the cake, is that by being a better parent and practicing these kinds of skills, you become a more aware person, a more
Hmm.
fulfilled person. The way you see things changes. And I just love that. I love personal growth to begin with,
Yeah,
but specifically, I love watching parents grow, because I know that it will spill over on their kids.
hmm,
And not just their kids, their nieces, their nephews,
yes,
their neighbors' kids. It spills over. And this generation needs all of us to join together right now, because it needs us to lead them well.
absolutely. That could have a compounding influence on, as you said, just not the immediate family, but on their networks and so on. So yeah. Well, Laura, thank you so much. I have just a couple of, I know that I, have been just enjoying the course myself as your student. I just wanted to, maybe have you share with our viewers and our listeners a little bit about the Fearless Parenting course.
Yes. Well, kids, I would have students say to me constantly, can you talk to my mother? Can you talk to my father? Can you talk to my teacher? Um, and I would hear this for years. And I just thought it was enough to help them. But what I realized was it's not enough to help them. It's not enough to go into a school and work with a student without working with their parents, because parents are the ultimate influencers for their kids.
Absolutely.
And without that piece, our youth will struggle, right? And so I developed this program once COVID hit, and here in the US, it was late March, and I saw what was happening. Anxiety went from 1 in 4 to 1 in 3. I couldn't anymore. I said, I have to do something. So I sat and I developed a parenting program, and I called it Fearless Parenting. And it's a 3-month program. And I've included some really good trainings that I have done for parents, because parents, really could use that education. When we understand more, we can do more.
Mm-hmm.
So there are trainings involved. It is a 3-month program. We meet through Zoom twice a month. The most amazing parents are in that group. I mean, I am so grateful you're there, Ari, because you add so much value to our group, and each parent in there does. And so it's a bonding group of parents that are all looking to do what's right for their
Mm-hmm.
children, to empower them, and to grow themselves. And it's just such an amazing group, and I'm so honored to spend this time with them. So the next program will run starting in October.
Okay.
And there is a wait list that I have up for it, for whoever is interested in finding out more information. I think I sent you that link, or we can put it somewhere in the
Yes.
comments.
Mm-hmm.
But for my job, as I'm sure for yours, right? You've had to get degrees and certifications and professional development and go to conferences, and we put that time in to be better at our job. We're not always putting that time in to be better at the most important job you'll ever have.
Oh my goodness,
And
yes.
that's parenting. So I would love for anybody who's interested, reach out to either one of us about the program. And I'd love to see you in it, because I know that it will be the youth in your life that will benefit as much as you will.
Thank you, Laura. And again, I just cannot speak highly enough of the program. And I honestly do look forward to that, the catch-up sessions we have every couple of weeks. So again, to the moms out there who are listening to us or viewing this, feel free to reach out. We'll have the link at the on the comments below. I'll also post an infographic through the podcast, so we have people who want to reach out to us. But again, please don't hesitate. I think this will be the best investment you will make in your parenting journey. And I'm saying that not as Laura, as your friend, but really as a student of this program. And it's been a few weeks, and hand on heart, I'm coaching myself all the time now. It's like, is it default or are you? So I have Laura, I have your voice constantly in my subconscious now, which is good.
You so inspire me, really. So thank you. That means everything to me. So as much as I want to see parents grow, I really want to see our youth being more connected, so we can help them through these tough times.
Absolutely.
So thank you for everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time as well, Laura. Thank you so much for sharing this, powerful, these 5 takeaways. And so I'm looking forward again to connecting back with you next week. But until then, stay safe. And I again will post the information in the comments below.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
It was an honor to be here with you. So love to you.